Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we are driving the brand new Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Now, the E-Class has a long story behind it. I'm not gonna delve into it. It's been around for a long time, even though it didn't carry the E-Class name throughout the history all the time. So there was a time when the E-Class, what was basically the forefather of the E-Class, had a different name. It was a lot simpler back then. But starting in the 90s, Mercedes started naming its cars according to this conventional scheme we have even today in place. So in 2020, they launched the latest version of the E-Class. This is not a completely new platform. This is still the W213, 213. So this is the facelift of the car unveiled initially back in 2016, late 2016, early 2017. So you will notice a couple of big changes though, because this is quite a big facelift. And the E-Class is known for big facelifts because on the previous generation, W212, I think the facelift cost about 1 billion euros back then. So it was pretty huge because the E-Class is an important car for Mercedes-Benz. And the segment is still relevant in the sales world, even though we are witnessing the rise of SUVs of all sizes. Even in these conditions, this segment of premium mid-size sedans is still relevant. And that's not only the case for Mercedes-Benz, it's also the case for BMW with its 5 Series and Audi with its A6. So, what's new on the refreshed E-Class? Well, if you look at it from the outside, you will notice instantly that the front end is different. I think it's the first time when the E-Class gets a new design look before the S-Class. Now, usually, since the S-Class is the flagship of Mercedes-Benz, whatever goes for the S-Class transpires into the other models in the range. I still remember when the previous generation S-Class was launched. Then the C-Class came along, and then the E-Class came along, and all these cars looked exactly the same, but on a different scale. I still remember those days, and for the first time ever, the E-Class got a facelift in March this year, and came out with this design, which looks kind of similar to what we have on the S-Class, but for this time, the E-Class came out before the S-Class, which is rather interesting. It doesn't necessarily signal a different approach in terms of importance for the brand. I still think the S-Class is the most important car, the flagship of the Mercedes-Benz range, but I think they wanted to keep the design the same, similar throughout the range, and since it was simply the time for the E-Class to be launched, they just did it. So yeah, the front end is similar to the S-Class. The new E-Class has new headlamps with a slightly reshaped design. All E-Class models come with LED lights as standard. We have a new daytime running light LED strip in the headlamp, and the car we're driving is fitted with the AMG line package, which means the front grille has some a different design. I mean, it's huge and imposing anyway, but it has some small chrome bits in it. Also, the front bumper has some air intakes on the sides, which are fake, by the way. They do have some channels on the sides, on the extremes. They do guide air around the car in order to make it more aerodynamic, but they're not really cooling anything. They're just there for one purpose: to look good. They're made of plastic and they are blocked out, but the car looks really good up front. Also, the AMG line now comes with 2 character lines on the bonnet, which are called power domes by Mercedes. This is new. The old model didn't have this feature for AMG line models. Now, around the back, the differences are also quite big. I mean, if you put this new E-Class next to the old one, you will notice the differences really easily. We have new taillights. That's the biggest difference. And for this generation, Mercedes returned to the split tail light. If you recall, the previous model, the pre-facelift version, had the stoplights on the sides, on the rear fenders. This new one has them split right down the middle, with half of the taillight on the rear fender and half of it on the boot lid. So they do look good, though. I'm not a big fan of the rear end. I don't know exactly why. I think those, if you look with, if you pay attention, you might notice that the taillights have a certain type of triangular shape, and I'm not a really big fan of triangular taillights. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I just don't like it. It's weird. And even though the taillights do have LEDs in them, and they do look good when they work, it's still really peculiar to look at. Maybe it just takes some time to get used to it. From the sides, the proportions are exactly the same as on the old model. And the E-Class always looked good. I mean, it always looked elegant and understated. And this is still the case for the new model. Inside the cabin, we also have quite a few updates. So we have the new MBUX infotainment system, which is dominated by two big screens, 12.3 inches each. And, you know, as I said in many of my reviews with the Mercedes, there's really nothing more you can ask in terms of graphics. And, you know, you can customize everything about it. You can customize the instrument cluster a lot. You don't even have to look at a rev counter or a speedometer if you don't want to. You can just adjust everything in it. The same goes for the infotainment screen, which is, it has brilliant graphics, looks good, you can customize it and everything. It looks brilliant. I love the fact that they kept these buttons here, unlike on the new S-Class, which has like a big screen over here, which I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I'm usually not a big fan of screens. That's why I had a big issue with the previous generation S-Class when it first came out, because it had this huge rectangular screen over here, and then those cute, really nice looking air vents underneath it, which really didn't fit in the picture, to be honest, because, you know, you had square shapes, you had round shapes. It didn't feel cohesive enough. But you know what, it grew on me, and they did round off the edges of the screens. So, you know, overall it's okay. I like it. I think this is the best looking interior in the segment right now. And that segment includes the 5 Series, the A6, and the Lexus ES. So we have really nice open pore wood trims. They do squeak a little, which is like weird for a Mercedes. I know people have been complaining about this recently, and I did expect Mercedes to fix this, but I don't know. It does squeak a little bit. It's not that bad as people make it seem, and I think it's because this is veneer, this is wood. It's not plastic, because most of the squeakiness in those videos you see online most of the squeakiness comes from cars fitted with piano black trims. Thank God we don't have that on here. I mean, I love the way piano black looks, but if you're gonna use it day by day, it's gonna get instantly dirty with dust and fingerprints. I prefer one of these a lot more, even though I'm not a fan of wood inside cars. But this is like gray, white, open pore wood, and it does fit into the color scheme of the car. If this was like walnut in a brown shade, I wouldn't even like it. So yeah, we also have the AMG seats. As you would expect, this is an AMG line car, and we have the AMG line steering wheel, which is I think this is the best looking steering wheel in the business right now. It looks absolutely amazing. It has 3 spokes, but they are each split into 2. And they're still really thin and they look really good. And on the left side and on the right side, the spoke on the left side and the spoke on the right side contain a few buttons, and they are all touch sensitive buttons, unlike on the previous model where you had traditional buttons. So we did see these touch sensitive buttons on the GLE, for example, but the thing is, they made everything touch sensitive here, and it's quite annoying to use, to be honest, because these buttons don't always recognize what you are trying to do. So you're just, the way you control it is on the right side of the steering wheel, you have a set of buttons which will be used to adjust something on this screen right here. So you can change the music, you can change the menu you're into and so on by using these buttons up here. The problem is you might sometimes, swipe right and nothing happens. You might swipe up, nothing happens, and so on. So it's pretty annoying at times. Then under these buttons, you have the buttons for the multimedia system. So you can raise or lower the volume using this, just doing this, and it doesn't work. A lot of the times it doesn't work. So it does get pretty annoying. I guess over time you get used to using them, just like I did get used to using BMW's gesture control, which just takes a bit of time to get used to it. You got to learn how to do the motions, to raise the volume and lower it and so on. So I guess this is the same on the new E-Class steering wheel. So you just got to get used to the way the buttons react to your input. But I still prefer classical buttons. Just give me some old school style buttons and I'm good. Okay, so getting back to the steering wheel, the size is perfect. It's really big, and the center cap is small, so that you can see these big. So you can see the instrument cluster with that big speedometer and rev counter. So yeah, it works. It looks good. I really can't complain. And on the E-Class, you get a new system that measures your attentiveness. So basically, on the older models, the assisted driving systems would work by using a counterbalance. Basically, the weight of your hand on the steering wheel would tell the car that you are paying attention. Every semi-autonomous driving system needs you to keep your hand on the steering wheel at all times, because we don't have fully autonomous systems right now. So the way a car can tell if you're keeping your hand on the steering wheel is by using a counterbalance. So basically, the weight of your hand will, slightly tilt the steering wheel, and the car knows that you're holding it. Now, I'm told by Mercedes that on the new E-Class, you have basically touch-sensitive sensors into the steering wheel, which basically work like the ones on your phone. So basically, you just have to press on a certain part of the steering wheel, and the car knows that you are paying attention. Quite a nifty trick. Now, let's talk about the interior space. There's plenty of it up front. Not so much in the back. I was surprised. If I keep the seat in my comfortable driving position, and I have to sit in the back, there's not a lot of room left for my knees, and also for my head. I can sit upright in the back, and I will not touch the roof lining, but there's like 1 centimeter between the top of my head and the roof. That's really not a lot of room. This is more room than in the ES, but it's not more than in the A6 or the 5 Series. Speaking of practicality, there's plenty of storage spaces in the car, especially in the door bins, which are huge. Plenty of room over here as well. Plenty of chargers for your phone. They all use Type-C connectors though, so you might want to keep that in mind. The boot has 540 liters of space available, which is class leading by 10 liters compared to the 5 Series, and it beats the other two cars as well. So plenty of practicality. This car will be used as a taxi in Germany a lot. So that's gonna be interesting to see what engines they go for. Usually they would go for 2-liter diesels. Oh, my bad. 2.2-liter diesels, because that's what you would get on previous generation E200 and E220 models. But for the new generation, for the W213 generation, Mercedes launched a host of new engines. So it was quite a big departure, because they dropped the V6s and went with straight sixes instead. I mean, I guess you probably already know that Mercedes returned to straight six engines. And they also dropped the old workhorse 2.2-liter diesel and replaced it with a more traditional 2-liter model. We have that 2-liter diesel engine on this car because this is a 220D. Now the range is made up of mostly, I mean, there's only one exception, 2-liter and 3-liter mills. So there is one exception. There's a 1.6-liter engine on the E200. Don't really recommend it, because this is a big car, and you might need some more horsepower. It has 160 horsepower, and I don't think that's enough for a car of this size. All cars come with the automatic 9-speed gearbox developed by Mercedes-Benz, so you can't get a manual. And the range continues with 2-liter diesel and petrol engines, goes up to 3-liter petrol and diesel engines in various combinations. And you also have a lot of plug-in hybrids and a lot of mild hybrids available. Now we have the E220D 4MATIC version. This means it uses a 2-liter diesel engine with 194 horsepower and 400 Newton meters of torque. It's decent, it's enough for this car, to be honest. If you're gonna be a cab driver, this is gonna be enough for you. You can cruise on the highway, you know, doing 130 kilometers an hour, which is like the speed limit in most of Europe, and you'll be fine. But I would go for the mild hybrid or the plug-in hybrid models. I think the best choices are the E300 E or E300DE, depending on your preference. I would go for the petrol version. They have over 300 horsepower. They use a 2-liter or 4-cylinder petrol engine under the hood, but they are also being helped by an electric motor with over 100 horsepower, or 122 if I remember correctly. And they might be your best choice if you ask me, especially if you live in a city that has a congestion charge. That's something you might want to keep in mind. This engine does sound a bit raucous. If you rev it over 3000 RPM, it does get a bit noisy, but you rarely get so high because the gearbox will upshift quite fast. It won't let the engine rev up so high. And it's well insulated as well. You don't really hear it in the cabin. It doesn't vibrate that bad. It's actually quite okay. But as I said, I would prefer a petrol plug-in hybrid version if it was down to my money. As far as the fuel consumption goes, I saw an average of 8.5 to 9 liters around town. I saw an average of under 5.5 with an average speed of about 50 miles an hour, and at an average speed of 75 miles an hour, the consumption went up to 8 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is fine if you ask me. I mean, you still have to remember this is a pretty big car, and whenever you're driving it around town, you will notice that, because finding a parking space can be tricky for a car that's this long, especially if you're looking at a very, very tight parking space. So, what's the takeaway then about the E-Class? Well, I like it, but there are some shortcomings. I like the way it looks. I like the way it looks both inside and outside. I like the new MBUX system, even though it does have its shortcomings as well. For example, if you want to change the music, you have to be in the music submenu in the infotainment screen, or else you won't be able to do it. You do have a shortcut here, but it still raises up the music submenu. For some reason, it doesn't feel that well made. It feels flimsy in some parts. For example, it doesn't make that traditional thunk sound whenever you close the door, which I was surprised. It actually sounds, it doesn't sound that, you know, serious. German cars used to have like this really strong sound whenever you close the door. You felt like you were in a vault. Now this doesn't really happen anymore. Everything is extremely light in here, and you know, weight gives items the impression of, you know, build quality, and I don't really feel that in here. I know Mercedes really had to cut some corners and really had to make things lighter in order to cope with the CO2 emission standards and so on, but maybe let's not cut too much. I don't know. But you know what, it's a comfortable car. It's not thirsty depending on which engine you get, because you can also get, you know, the E63 AMG version or the E53 AMG version, and so on. So I think you have plenty of choices in the range if you want to get an E-Class, and it's going to be a good car for most part. The competition is rather stiff. As I said, the 5 Series, the A6 and the Lexus ES are really good cars. And you know, each car has its pros and cons. The E-Class has one of the best suspensions, but it's not the most comfortable car in the segment. I think the ES is the most comfortable car. On the other hand, the ES has a really big problem with the room, with the headroom in the back, because it has a sloping roofline towards the back, and you can't really fit 4 adults in it, which is kind of a shame for a car that's this big. Then there's the 5 Series, which is sportier than the E-Class, and the A6 I didn't get to drive. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for a really good looking car with luxury inside, with probably the best infotainment system on the market today, you should go for the E-Class. If you're looking for something else, you should probably look at the ES or the 5 Series. Now, this being said, this has been my review of the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and of course, subscribe. Drop a comment in the section below and let me know which one of the 3 main competitors in the segment you would get. See you guys next time. Ciao.